Hello everyone, I'm Kote. Today I will tell you 5 stories about sugar. Let's start with common myth that sugar causes hyperactivity in children. There is evidence that sugar does not cause hyperactivity in children, but it really causes increased energy level in the body, but it's only temporary short-term effect. But in long-term intake, too much sugar causes increased risk of obesity, increased risk of cancer, and increased risk of diabetes. And diabetes separately increased risk of many chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and neurodegenerative diseases. Now let's talk about how we get sugars and what type of sugars we have. When we eat bread, rice, we eat carbohydrates. When we eat vegetables, fruits, we eat carbohydrates. When we eat fruits, we eat carbohydrates. When we eat milk, we eat carbohydrates. So, carbohydrates is general name. Carbohydrates can be complex or simple. Carbohydrates can be complex or simple. Simple carbohydrates we call sugars. And we have different type of sugars. For example, lactose, sucrose, fructose, and glucose. Lactose is milk sugar. Lactose is in milk. Sucrose is table sugar, table granulated sugar, which we use in baking, in tea, in coffee. That's sucrose. And fructose is sugar in fruits and honey. Glucose is sugar in baked products, for example bread and other baked products, cakes. Now, how our body gets sugars. Any sugar, does not matter what type of sugar you get, eventually will convert it to glucose. Our body uses only glucose. So, no matter if you got glucose, fructose, sucrose, lactose, or complex carbohydrates, they eventually will break down to glucose, and our body will absorb glucose. And glucose, now let's discuss what glucose is doing in the body. When we absorb glucose, it affects pancreas and insulin secretion increases. But it has toxic effect on beta cells on pancreas, and temporary insulin level increases, but over time it damages beta cells and eventually insulin secretion is decreased. So long-term effect of high glucose level in blood is decreased insulin secretion. Glucose have toxic effect on blood vessels. It directly affects blood vessels and it causes decreased nitric oxide secretion. Decreased nitric oxide secretion means hypertension. Blood vessels constricts and it causes peripheral resistance increases, and eventually it causes hypertension. Hypertension damages lots of organs, including kidneys. So glucose have direct toxic effect on pancreas. It has direct toxic effect on blood vessels, it has direct toxic effect on neurons in the brain. Increased level of glucose causes several types of damage in neurons. Most important is reactive oxygen species. So it causes generating free radicals, and these free radicals damage DNA, and eventually it damages neurons, and eventually it causes neurodegenerative diseases. So increased level of glucose in the brain causes neurodegeneration because of reactive oxygen species, and also it causes inflammation in neurons, and this is second mechanism. Also, fourth, glucose affects our immune cells, including T cells and macrophages. It causes activation of these cells. They release inflammatory cytokines, and inflammatory cytokines causes chronic inflammation in the body. So increased glucose level causes chronic inflammation in the body. This inflammation damages all type of cells, and it causes chronic diseases, including cancer. To say again, glucose has direct toxic effect on pancreas, it has direct toxic effect on blood vessels, on neurons, and immune cells. And now let's talk about how protect ourselves from such damaging effect of glucose, and what is normal level of daily intake of glucose and carbohydrates. If person requires 2000 calories per day, it's average body of man, it requires less than 325 grams of carbohydrates. So if you intake carbohydrates daily, and you should intake less than 325 grams. What is carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are vegetables. Carbohydrates are legumes and fruits and baking products and bread and rice, and almost any food contains carbohydrates, but most common source of carbohydrates are breads, vegetables, and fruits. It should be less than 325 grams. And if we use added sugars means simple sugars. So when we say carbohydrates, we mean complex carbohydrates. When we say sugars, it means simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates, like we already said, glucose, fructose, sucrose, lactose. It should be less than 50 grams. So somebody can think that 300 plus 325 plus 50, it means 375. No, it's not correct calculation. Correct calculation means that when we say 325, we include this 50 gram of sugars. So we should minimize intake of sugars. And it's recommended we should minimize baked products such as donuts and breads and such things, because they are source of simple sugars. And fifth story is about our ancestors. and ancient humans. It is known that ancient humans had less chronic diseases, and cancer cases were also rare. Of course, our ancestors had much more likely to die with accidents and during hunting or during wars and such things, but they had which of them reached their older age, they still had less chronic diseases and less cancers. And why? What was the reason for it? Main reason was their eating habits. What they were eating? They were eating many fruits, many vegetables, less proteins, and very few simple sugars. Of course, they get some simple sugars from fruit and from vegetables, but their proportion and number of low sugars was much less compared to modern human. And even there is some evidences that our ancestors almost had no diabetes. And there is some tribes where diabetes does not exist at all. And some there is archaeological information about our ancestors and researchers working about it, and they concluding that ancient humans had no diabetes. And what was main reason? Main reason was less sugar, less obesity. Less sugar means less chronic diseases. It means much healthy blood vessels, healthy neurons, healthy immune system, hence healthy pancreas, and less chronic diseases and less risk of dying from cancer. To summarize, sugar does not cause hyperactivity. Sugar causes obesity. Sugar increases risk of cancer. Sugar increases risk of diabetes. What we eat carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are complex and simple. Simple carbohydrates we call sugars. Sugars can be different types: glucose, fructose, sucrose, and lactose. They have direct toxic effects on beta cells, on pancreas. They have direct toxic effects on blood vessels, neurons, and immune system. Normal daily intake of carbohydrates is 325 grams, and from them 50 grams should be simple sugars. Our ancestors had less chronic diseases, less cancers, because they eat more fruits and vegetables, less proteins, and less sugars. So what should we take from this video? We should take from this video that sugar is white death, and we should minimize sugar in our diet. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your listening. If you like my videos, please thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Thank you very much.